Jerusalem left and went looking everywhere for Clarus of Clarence, king of arms. When he found him, he told him everything, and the man said he was very willing to do it. But the sun had already gone down, and it was growing late now, and he did not want to endanger two knights in the dark night. Instead, he would be willing to judge the morning of the next day, when the king was at mass and everyone was resting. Jerusalem went back to Trnt and told him how the battle was to take place and about the weapons he had chosen, and he said he was to take whichever of the two he liked better. In the morning, while the king was at mass, the battle would take place. "Since the battle will not take place this evening," said Trnt, "I don't want to have the weapons in my possession. If I should defeat or kill him, would not want people to say I had performed some trickery on the weapons while I had them during the night, and that was the reason I had defeated him. Give them back to Lord Vercimes, and tomorrow when the battle takes place, have him bring them." When Jerusalem heard Trnt speak that way, he looked into his face and said, "Oh, virtuous knight, versed in arms, you are worthy of bearing a royal crown. I cannot believe that you will not be victorious in this battle." The king of arms left Trnt and went to the hermitage where the other knight was, and he told him that the hour was growing late, and the judge could not decide the battle well if it was not daytime, but that they had arranged for it would be the following day, when the king would be at mass. Lord Vercimes said that he would be satisfied with that. Early in the morning, the king of arms got two knights and took them to the middle of the forest, where no one would be able to see them. When they saw that they were ready, Jerusalem said, "Knights of great virtue, this is your death and your sepulchre. These are the weapons chosen by this knight and accepted by Trnt. Let each take whichever one he pleases." And he placed them on the lovely meadow grass. "Now," said Clarus of Clarence, "gentlemen of great nobility and chivalry, you are in this isolated place. Expect no help from relatives or friends. You are at the point of death, so place your hope only in God and in your virtue. I want to know who will wish to serve as judge of this battle." "What?" said Lord Vercimes. "Didn't we agree that it would be you?" "And you, Trnt, who do you want to be the judge?" "I want it to be the one that Lord Vercimes wants." "So since you want to have me as your judge, you must swear by the order of chivalry to obey all my commands." They swore that they would. After the oath, the knight said to Trnt, "Take the weapons you like, and I will go into battle with the ones you leave behind." "No," said Trnt, "you have been holding them. They were brought here in your name. You are the challenger, so choose first, and then I will take mine." And the knights stood there, arguing about ceremony. The judge picked up the weapons to put an end to the dispute. He put some of them on the right side and others on the left. Then he picked up the two straws, one of them long and the other short. The judge said, "Whichever one gets the longest, take the weapons on the right, and whoever gets the short one, the weapons on the left." When they had each picked up the weapons, they quickly took off all their clothes, and put on the painful shirts that could be well called hair cloths of sorrow. The judge made two lines on the field, and he placed one of the men on one line and the other on the other, and he ordered them not to move until he said so. They cut a tree's branch so that the judge could be on a sort of cenotaph. When everything was ready, the judge went to Lord Vercimes and said, "I am judged by the authority you have given me, and it is my duty to warn you and beseech you not to come to such a narrow strait as this. Remember God, and don't die so desperately. As you know, the justice of our Lord does not pardon a man who brings on his own death, and he is condemned for all eternity." "Let's stop all the talk now," said the knight. "Each of us knows his worth and what he can do, both in temporal life and in the spiritual one. Have Trnt come to me, and it might be possible for us to come to an understanding." "I don't think what you are asking is reasonable," said the judge. "You are equals. Why should he come to you? But in any case, Jerusalem, go and ask Trnt if he wants to come and talk to this knight." Jerusalem went to Trnt and asked him if he wanted to go there. Trnt answered, "If the judge is commanding me to go, I will, but for that knight over there, I wouldn't take a step backwards or forwards for everything he's worth." Jerusalem told him how the judge was obligated to do everything possible to make peace between the knights. Then Trnt said, "Jerusalem, tell the knight that I see no reason why I should have to go to him. If you want something from me, let him come here." He took the answer to him, and then the judge said, "All right, Seems to me that Trnt is doing what he should do. But knight, you can go to the middle of the field, and Trnt will come there." So it was done that way. When they were facing each other, Lord Vercimes said, "Trnt, if you want to have peace with me, if you want me to forgive you because of your youth, I'll do it, on condition that you hand over the bauble of that illustrious lady, Donna Agnes of Berry, to me, along with the knife and the paper shield, so that I can show it to the ladies, because you know very well that you're not worthy of having anything at all from such a lofty and virtuous lady as she is. Your station, lineage, and condition aren't good enough even to allow you to take off her left slipper. They're not even enough for you to raise you to my rank. In fact, it was out of kindness that I decided to do combat with you." "Knight," said Trnt, "I'm not unaware of who you are, or what you can do, but this is not the time or the place for us to discuss the merits of our lineage. I am Trnt LeBlanc. When a sword is in my hand, no king, duke, count, or marquis can deny me. That is known throughout the world, but anyone can easily find the seven capital sins in you. Let's go to battle and do what we came here for, and let's not go on with unnecessary and worthless words. If even one of my hairs fell to the ground, I wouldn't surrender it to you, much less allow you to pick it up." "Since you don't want to reach an agreement," said the judge, "do you want life or death?" Lord Vercimes said, "I am very sorry about the death of this haughty young man. Let's go to battle, and let each one go back to his place." The judge got up on the cenotaph that had been made with branches, and he shouted, "Go now, knights! Let each of you act like a valiant and good knight." They went at each other in a fury. The French knight carried his knife high and in front of his head, and Trnt held his just above his chest. When they were close to each other, the French knight struck hard at the middle of Trnt's head. Trnt parried and struck back, and he dealt him a blow to the top of his ear that almost dug into his brain. The other man struck Trnt in the middle of his thigh, and the wound gaped about a hand's breadth. He quickly stabbed him again in his left arm, and the knife sank as far as the bone. They both fought so hard that it was dreadful. They were so close to each other that with every swing they drew blood. It was a pitiful sight for anyone who saw the wounds to the two men. Their shirts had become completely red from all the blood they had lost. Jerusalem repeatedly asked the judge if he wanted him to make them stop fighting, and the cruel judge answered, "Let them come to the end of their cruel days, since that is what they want." I am convinced that at that very moment both of them would have rather had peace than war. But since they were very brave and very courageous knights, they fought ceaselessly, without mercy. Finally Trnt saw that he was near death because of all blood he was losing, so he drew as close to the other man as he could, and stabbed him in the left breast, straight into his heart. The other man dealt him a mighty slash to his head, causing him to lose the sight of his eyes, and he fell to the ground before the other one. And if the Frenchman had been able to hold himself up when Trnt fell, he could have easily killed him if he had wanted to, but he did not have enough strength, and he immediately fell dead on the ground. When the judge saw that the knights were lying there so still, he got down from the cenotaph, and going up to them he said, "Upon my word, you two have behaved like good and very honourable knights. No one could find fault with you." And he made the sign of cross twice over each of them, and taking two sticks he made a cross and laid it over the two bodies. Then he said, "I see that Trnt's eyes are still open a little, and if he isn't dead, he's very near to it. Jerusalem, I charge you to stay here and guard these bodies, and I'll go to the court to give the news to the king." He found the king leaving mass, and in everyone's presence he said, "My lord, in truth, there are two most valiant knights in your majesty's court in the morning, and now they are so near to death that there is no hope for them." "Who are these knights?" "My lord," said Claros of Clarence, "one is Lord Vercimes, and the other is Trnt LeBlanc." "I am very displeased," said the king, "by this news. Let us go out there before we eat and see if we can help them." "In faith," said Claros, "one has already departed from this world, and I believe the other will soon join him. That is how badly they were wounded." When the relatives and friends of the knights heard the news, they gathered up their arms and rushed as quickly as they could, on foot and on horseback, and our Lord God gave us the grace to get there before the others. We found Trnt so covered with blood that he was unrecognizable, and he had his eyes slightly open. When the others saw their lord lying dead, they quickly ran towards our knight, wanting to take his life, and we defended him very well. We split our groups into two parts, and, with our backs to each other, we kept his body between our lines. There were many more of them than us, but every place they advanced they found their way blocked. At the same time they shot arrows, and one of them struck poor Trnt, who was lying on the ground. The high constable arrived immediately with many men, and he separated us. Soon afterwards the king came with the tournament judges. When they saw the knights, one dead and the other seemingly in the throes of death, they ordered no one to move them until they had held council. While the king was in council, listening to the tale of Claros of Clarence and Jerusalem, the kings of arms, the queen arrived with all the ladies and maidens. When they saw they wept for the deaths of two such singular knights. Fair Agnes turned to Trnt's relatives and said, "Knights who love Trnt, are you doing so little for your good friend and relative that you have let him leave life like this? That's the way he'll die, lying on the cold ground, his blood pouring out. A half hour more, and he won't have a drop of blood left in his body." "My lady, what would you have us do?" said a knight. "The king has commanded, under penalty of death, that no one should dare touch them or move them from here." "Oh, poor me!" said fair Agnes. "Our lord does not want a sinner to die, and the king does. Have a bed brought, and put him on it until the king finishes his counsel. The wind is getting into his wounds, and will make him worse." The relatives immediately sent for a bed and a tent. While they were getting it, Trnt was continually nauseous because of the wounds and because of all the blood he was losing. When Agnes saw how much pain Trnt was in, she said, "In all conscience I should not be blamed by father or mother, or by brothers and sisters, or other relatives, or by our lords the king and queen, because I am doing this with pure intentions." She removed the clothes she was wearing, which were of white velvet, and she put them on the ground, and had Trnt placed on top of the clothing. Then she begged many of her maidens to take off their clothes, and lay them over Trnt. When Trnt felt the warmth of the clothes, he opened his eyes wider than before. Fair Agnes sat down, and took his head and put it in her lap, saying, "Oh, poor me, Trnt! What an unlucky bauble it was that I gave to you! If I'd known that something like this would happen, I wouldn't have given it to you for anything in the world. I beg you, knights, bring the body of Lord Vercimes here, next to me. Even though I did not love him while he was alive, I do want to honor him in his death." They quickly brought him to her, and putting his head on the left side of her lap, she said, "Lord Vercimes spent 7 years of his life trying to win me, and this is his reward. He performed extraordinary acts of chivalry out of love for me, and he wanted to marry me, but I am of greater lineage and wealth, and I refused to consent to something that was for his pleasure and satisfaction, and now the poor knight is dead because of jealousy." The king came out of his council, having heard the complete story from the king of arms, and he had 3 archbishops, the bishops of all the clergy, come in a solemn procession from the city to honor the dead knight. Trnt's relatives had doctors and a bed and a tent brought, and everything else that was needed. They found that he had 11 wounds in his body, and 4 of them were critical. After Trnt had been treated, all the clergy had arrived. The king and the judges ordered the dead knight placed in the box that the dead are carried in, covered with a beautiful golden cloth, that was used for knights who die in battle. Trnt went behind him, carried on a large shield. Even though his hand was useless, he could not use it or hold it up, it was decided to tie it to a stick with the bare sword that he had killed him with in his hand. After this fashion the clergy went first, and afterwards came the dead knight with all the knights on foot. Then came the king with all the great titled lords. Then came Trnt the way I have described, with the queen following, and all the ladies and maidens. They came to the high constable with 3,000 armed men. They went to the church of St. George, and here they very solemnly held a requiem mass. When the king and queen had left the church with all the others, they accompanied Trnt to his lodgings, and every day the king went to see Trnt until he completely recovered. That is what was done to all the wounded, and 30 maidens were given to Trnt to serve him continually.